On the 7th of May, we voted with people who at some point in their lives felt slapped in the face by the new South Africa. We wanted to find out whether they still have faith in this democracy.
Vote ya ka ke vote se ANC ibile a se secret.
Into linqenelayo njengoba ndivotile linqwenela ukuba izinto zitshintshe.
So for nna gore ke vote, I'm carrying out his legacy again.
And later, what can South African opposition politicians learn from their African counterparts about fighting liberators at the polls? This is Checkpoint, and I'm Ngepile Mabuse. All of them were affected by police brutality that matched what many had to endure during apartheid. What has made their experiences even worse is that in a new South Africa, where all of our human rights are supposed to be respected and protected, they are yet to see justice. So how did they vote in a democracy they feel has let them down?
In January, Audrey Siema was grieving for her eldest son. 27-year-old Lerato died in Mututlung during a protest over the lack of water. The loyal ANC supporter was allegedly dragged by the police into a nyala and severely beaten. He later died in hospital. But on election day, his mother was ready to endorse the ANC government again.
I'm part of who carry on his legacy. Because Lerato Santla is a VT coordinator, ANC branch, and for me to do that, it's like he was mobilizing people to go and vote. So for Nahorke vote, I'm carrying out his legacy again. And issue I think I have to forgive for me to be free.
Only months before, Audrey was furious with the party.
He was wearing this cap inside the nyala. So we were surprised about the blood. It's so bloody, so how did he have blood inside the nyala when we were told that he was thrown? I'm angry to the point that they stole his precious life from him. At
that time, a checkpoint investigation revealed the connection between water shortages and widespread corruption in the ANC-run municipality. Instead of upgrading ailing infrastructure, millions of rand were being used to pay contractors to deliver water. One truck alone could make up to 1.2 million rand a year. We traced one of the contractors to this palatial mansion in the midst of utter poverty. He refused to give us an interview, so we confronted him.
You made millions from the water crisis.
Yeah, I was working, yes. I was working.
Yeah, but is it because of your political connections?
Not a political man. I'm not a political. I haven't got a membership card of the party.
Did you receive the contracts?
No.
Did you ever actually tender for these contracts, or they were given to you because of your political connections?
I was having a tender from 2007.
Did you tender, or it was given to you, Mr. Mkwena?
No, I tendered it. You must go to Marikana.
But there's no records of you tendering,
no,
Mr. Mkwena.
I was tendering that tender. You born yesterday, you are jealous for this house.
The National Executive Committee of the ANC had been aware of these problems for years. Former Minister Richard Baloyi decided to dig deeper and found that the water supply disruptions were basically used as a cash cow for businesses owned by or aligned to officials within the municipality. Despite all this, Audrey says she still believes in the ANC.
It's not like corruption is like ANC. Corruption is like about within the ANC. Not that our party is corrupt. No, they were corrupt within our party. So we know how we immediately dismiss you.
None of those fingered have been prosecuted for what the ANC itself labeled widespread looting in the Northwest Province. Many have kept their jobs. But reports that the ANC had removed a few characters at the top seem to have been enough to convince people like Audrey that corruption is being dealt with. This despite the clear absence of accountability and punishment.
A hard-scrabble life of poverty. Nolufefe Noki lives in this hut with her 4 young cousins, whom she provides for. They survive on foster care grant money from the government, their lives constantly teetering on the margins of hope. But it wasn't always as bad as this. Nolufefe's younger brother, Mgcineni, was a platinum miner and used to send money home to supplement his sisters and her foster family's needs.
Bezimthanda njengoba umzali. Apha ekhaya bethi xa ifikileyo afike asilungiselele zonke into esikhalaza ngazo singenazo, asogqiba usilungiselela into zalapha ekhaya ezinje ngamasiko bezenziwa nguye. Bakho into efuna ukwenziwa bixhomeke kuye. Imfuyo ebeyithenga unayo nangoku. Unenkomo. Ebecinga bangaze abuye egula azohlala ekhaya ahlale nathi xa sekufika ixesha liba makabuye.
Mgcineni became famous in the 2012 strike at Marikana as the man in the green blanket. As the strike continued, Mgcineni rapidly rose to prominence as a leader. For those brief, heady days, he was transformed into a man with a future, loved by those he had left back home and respected by his fellow workers on the Platinum Belt. That changed forever on the winter afternoon when police opened fire on the strikers, killing 34. Mgcineni was among them. His brutal death has left his sister bitter.
Xa ndicinga le ndlela akhumbula asweleke ngayo kuye ungabe mnandi enhlizweni yami ngoba kaloku ubhetele bakuthiwa kwawagula asogqiba ugula asweleke. Ngoku eli hlobo asweleka ngalo lithi kalifikileyo ibe into endibona uba sozidlule kuthi. Mna namhlanje ndiyawucinga uba ndiyovota, kodwa loo nto yoba ndivota ayikho mdlini wam kuba ndicinga uba urhulumente kwakufanele ukuba ungenelele kule nto yoba abantu bangafi.
Despite her reluctance, Nolufefe decided to go to the polls. For her, it was a walk through familiar hills that she remembers from better days when her brother was still alive. And then up the road to the local school where the polling station was set up. The turnout here is low.
Ngoku ndigqiba uvota ngoku njengoba ndigqiba uvota andiziva ndingonwabanga, ndiziva nje ndirayithi. Into endinqwenelayo njengoba ndivotile ndinqwenela ukuba izinto zitshintshe.
This is a place of struggle and poverty, but it is where people share childhoods, share lives, and hope to grow old and share memories one day. But for Nolufefe, those hopes have been dashed. Voting has given her the chance to cling to a fragile belief in a better future, but it will never give her the days she wanted to share with her beloved brother.
Yena ekhaya besithanda sonke nekhaya. Bengekho bemthanda ukho bengamthandi. Into endizikhumbulayo ngayo njengoba sihlala apha ekhaya. Yena bengumuntu ovuka ekuseni okokuqala into bevuka yenze yena. Uvuka kwakhe. Uvuka avulela inkomo, athathe ibha yakhe encinci, ombathe, ahamba emadlelo atyhala inkomo zakwabo. Ngapha konke ndithanda bakuhlawule phansi, kuncokolwe, kube mnandi. Kodwa besonwaba yena qha apha ekhaya. Bengumuntu osonwabisayo qha.
This is Andries Tatane leading a protest march over basic services 3 years ago. Like most demonstrations in South Africa, things turned ugly, and Tatane was caught in the middle of the chaos. Witnesses say he approached the police requesting them to stop using water cannons and rubber bullets on the elderly. What happened next was one of post-apartheid South Africa's lowest moments. He was assaulted, shot and killed in full view of fellow protesters and the media. His very public death was beamed around the world, and at home, Tatane was labelled a new brand of freedom fighter whose fall would forever symbolize the Rainbow Nation's failures. Tatane's widow, Marikana, was among the very few Ficksburg residents who stayed away from the march, but she followed it closely through local media.
Community radio station ya rona ho thwe hona le motho a thuntsweng wa ntate.
Little did she know that it was her 33-year-old husband whose lifeless body lay on a hospital bed.
Ke fitla ke mo tshwara like mmele kaofela ka utlwa le stiff fela e se bile ka go otile.
Despite the many witnesses who saw Tatane being killed, the state failed to prove its case beyond a reasonable doubt, and the police officers accused of his murder walked.
Kore mera se ke bella ka thoko le assault fela nix batho be ba ka free fela ba tsama ba le jwalo ene ntho o tsa mohloko ba ne ba sa bontshe le gore ba bohloko kapa ba maswabi ka ntho ene etsa etseng ene le batho fela ba proud fela ba sa bontshe le gore ai re swabile ke ntho etsa etseng.
She says she hates the police and the justice system, but not the ruling party under whose government they serve.
Ke nete nna ka nako ne ke kwatetse mmuso ke sa batle next government ya ANC le ditori tsa teng o re etsalang ke bona infate but no jena ha o bona batho like ba leka hore ba tlo wena ha ona le mathata ba latella la ba ntse ba tseba hore ke kwatile ba tsebe hore ha ba fihla ke tlo ba roa ka kapa ke tlo ba tebela kapa ke tlo etsa but ba latella even le na premier atla ba tla tseba hore ke hantle ke dula hantle.
On voting day 2, they came. The local councillor personally escorted her to cast her ballot.
Ina akina problem ka ANC ya Free State ya rock. Kore ya sebetsa ene le support ba mpontshitseng yona. Ke member e kgolo ya the African National Congress. Vote ya ka ke votetse ANC e bila se secret ke a bua fela ke votetse ANC. Ke na le mabaka aka.
Soon after Tatane's death, the government started building the family a new home. It remains incomplete. She says it is the SABC who donated the house she now lives in. Tatane, on the other hand, died having left the ruling party fed up. Tatane's son still dreams of his father coming back.
One day o tlo bona khutla ke tsebeng ka kae ke le kile o bua le yena ka makgetlo gore motho wa hae o ile le hodimo sa lo dula teng mo ntate modimo mara o tlisisa o ntsana le ntho eno ene ntho e makatsang o dula a re maponesa a tlo motlisa ke ha maponesa a motlisa re tlo tropong re tlo etsang ha ke se ntho gore o tlo tliswa ke maponesa o eng ka kae but yena o na le ntho gore one day o tlo mmona fihla o tlo fihla ke le how many years ntho tse jwalo ke se ke le kena sekolo se ke le mo ke la high school ha kena o tla etsang mama o tlo thaba o tlo etsang ne.
When we return, what can South Africa learn from its neighbours about challenging liberators at the polls? Across Africa, liberation movements have survived massive scandals, with many of them managing to further tighten their grip on power, despite accusations of corruption and a failure to fulfill their promises. So what can South African opposition politicians learn from their counterparts on the continent about attempts to unseat liberation fighters?
Fellow South Africans, The Congress of the People shall make South Africa a united and disciplined nation of women and men who work hard every day to make South Africa better.
With these stirring words, former Defence Minister Musiwa Lekota announced the birth of a new political party. More than 1 million people believed in his message, making it possible for the Congress of the People, or COPE, to secure 7% of the national vote in 2009, a year after its formation. However, bitter squabbles and a ferocious leadership battle led to COPE's implosion. While the party was going down, its leader appeared to be in denial.
In fact, because of our success in defeating the birth pangs of the party, we have now convinced the people that the Congress of the People is here to stay. It's a permanent feature of South Africa's political stage.
Every election, new opposition parties are formed in South Africa, all intent on unseating the ANC. And every election, the ruling party demonstrates just how powerful it really is. The Democratic Alliance is the fastest growing party in South Africa, and many would expect that it would pose the greatest threat to the ANC nationally in years to come. But some suggest that it is parties to the left which have the greatest potential going forward. The sobering reality for DA planners is that it seems that more black Africans were willing to give the economic freedom fighters a chance than the DA in this election. Some analysts believe South Africa is following a pattern already seen in other countries on the continent.
Well, the African experience, which I think we are beginning to learn from in South Africa, is that after 15 or so years, most African liberation movements have not really succeeded in changing the economy that is inherited from the previous regime, colonial regime. And the people start to get disillusioned with the ruling parties.
Well, here he is, Robert Mugabe, Zimbabwean president.
Many African leaders have used draconian laws and violence to stay in power. Mbeki says these brutal instruments have failed to stop the force of labor unions.
Zimbabwe and South Africa have a similar history. The biggest threat to ZANU-PF came from the trade unions. It was the trade unions who led the formation of the movement for democratic change, which actually defeated ZANU-PF before ZANU started rigging the election and intimidating the voters. We are seeing the same process in South Africa. As we're talking now, the largest trade union in South Africa, which is the National Union of Metal Workers, NUMSA, has said it will stop supporting the ANC. So you are beginning to see the signs. President Kaunda, who was a very close, long-term supporter of our struggle and of the ANC, was defeated in an election by a party formed by the trade unions in 1991. So these are all the dynamics that are happening in the world that no doubt will happen in South Africa.
Now and again on Checkpoint, we'll go around the world to see how our stories are covered beyond South Africa's borders. This week, our international contributors sum up a reaction in their regions to the outcome of this election.
I'm John Bailey in Beijing, China. ANC gets an overwhelming mandate from South African voters, said the headline of Channel News Asia. The Singapore-based television channel said South Africans have voted resoundingly to extend the ANC's 20-year rule and ignored the party's leadership scandals and economic disorder. China's state media said the ruling party had a strong showing in the hotly contested Gauteng province, despite earlier claims by the DA that it will wrestle control from the ANC. The Japanese broadcaster NHK said the ANC has upheld the legacy of the late President Mandela, but it has been losing support amongst voters disillusioned by the sluggish economic growth and widespread corruption amongst government officials. The South China Morning Post said the results seem to indicate that the voters have put the party before president. The paper suggested that the vast majority of ANC supporters decided that their loyalty to the organization is greater than their loyalty to its current leadership.
John Battersby in London. The British media was not offering any prizes for guessing who would win South Africa's fifth democratic election. It was unanimous that the African National Congress would emerge as the clear winner with 60% or more of the vote. The main focus in the UK media was to explain to British readers why the ANC would win an overwhelming victory despite the fact that, according to commentators, it had governed poorly over the past 5 years. Evidence cited was the crippling strike in the mining industry, the high level of countrywide service delivery protests, ongoing accusations of corruption, and the Nkandla affair. But the main charge levelled at the government and the British media was the failure to reverse poverty and unemployment, which threatened to roll back the impressive gains made in the first 2 decades of the country's democratic rule. The Economist said the reason for the ANC's ongoing success at the polls was due largely to the fact that the ANC has managed to blur the lines between party and state, while at the same time dispensing ever-increasing social welfare benefits.
I'm Robin Creel in Nairobi. Kenyans are typically addicted to news and politics, especially when it involves their neighbours, and so South Africa's elections were closely monitored by the East African nation as well as its top politicians. Kenya's President Uhuru Kenyatta was quick to wish ANC President Jacob Zuma success even before South Africans took to the polls on Wednesday. And while ordinary Kenyans are usually complimentary of the road South Africans have taken thus far, one leading newspaper, the Daily Nation, reported that throughout the campaign, the ANC relied heavily on past anti-apartheid glories, but that the party's heroic past collides with South Africa's harsh present, adding that many voters are disaffected with the current crop of leaders.
That's all from us this week. Please give us your feedback. You can tweet us at checkpoint_ENCA. You can also visit our website and Facebook page. Thanks for watching. I'm Ngepile Mabuse.